Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, where we simplify the complexities of your leadership journey. My name is Mo, and I'll be sitting in the host chair today. I'm thrilled to welcome our guest, Mark Osborne, who is a visionary in the world of business-to-business marketing and go-to-market strategy. Mark is the founder of Modern Revenue Strategies, a company that helps SaaS, tech, and professional services and companies scale using fractional chief marketing support. He brings a sharp insight, innovative strategy, and a refreshing honesty about what it takes to succeed in today's hyper-competitive environment. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Mo. That's such a warm introduction. I will aspire to live up to it.
Wonderful, sir. Well, it's good to have you here. Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about your career journey? What inspired you?
Yeah, so I'll actually go back a bit, and I'll reveal my age a little bit in the process, because for some of your listeners might remember that in the early days of the internet, we didn't have access to the internet all the time. It wasn't in our pockets 24/7. In fact, a lot of people sort of had access to it on a infrequent basis, and so we treated it like a billboard at your local grocery store, where someone would put up a sign, free guitar lessons, take one, and so then you call people. So people would go and they would post things online, and then you would respond to them. There was no such thing as spam yet. So your username was your email address. You wanted everyone to know how to email you. And when I was in college, I was playing in bands and managing bands that I was playing in, and my friends' bands, because I was just a little bit better at the marketing stuff. It came pretty naturally. And I noticed that people were going online to trade. I have the bootleg concert tape of Dave Matthews playing in Birmingham on, this day.
Sweet.
So I started building databases of people that were fans of specific genres that lived in certain markets, and I had their email address. So when one of my bands went to one of their cities that sounded like what they liked, I sent them all an email and invited them to come out to the show. So I was selling out concerts for little unknown, college bands, which led to a job at a record label, which led to a job at a radio station. And ultimately I was, managing a team of, 20 plus salespeople and multi-million dollar, really 8-9 figure budgets in the sales space. But the broadcast industry was really slow to embrace this technology that was really transforming things. And what had gotten me really passionate about marketing back when I was in college was this data and technology, and sort of the nexus of those two things to create one-to-one relationships at scale. So I left a leadership position within the world's largest, or the country's largest operator of radio stations, and I was leading a top station in a top 10 market. And I left to go help found a little digital agency, which was just two guys in a garage figuring it out. But I helped build out their sales and marketing approaches. And then we built that solution. They've ultimately become a fairly fast growing agency. Moved to a larger agency in a larger town, got my MBA along the way, and really focused on analytics and data driven decision making. And I was working for a cutting edge company that was the first to put ads on Instagram. They were part of that Facebook ecosystem. And I really took a lot of pride in my ability to be very technical, but the pace of innovation within marketing technology and ad technology has just gotten to be where you can't keep up. And as I looked around at the companies that were being successful, it wasn't the ones that were focusing on the little arbitrations or the little ways of finding these growth hacks or ways of outsmarting the algorithm. But instead, it was the companies that were really taking a strategic approach. And that's actually what I covered a lot in my book that I mentioned, Are Your Leads Killing Your Business? Which is all about how modern companies, instead of trying to layer on all of these technologies and all of this data, are really building strategic approaches that they can then systemize and then layer in that data, that technology, artificial intelligence, to make those systems run better, faster, stronger, create better collaboration among teams, and really get the most out of people. And that's really what I work with companies to do today, is to help them build those systems founded in strategy that can then deliver that growth.
What was one of the most interesting or favorite band names that you were a part of?
So I was very fortunate that I got to work with Grammy winning artists. So John Mayer and I played a few shows. In fact, his first independent CD, he signed it It's been fun coming up in the business with you, to me, and the guys in the Zach Brown band. I was fortunate enough to work and play with some of those guys going along the way. So I really, got to stand in the shadow of greatness. And I always joke, I ultimately was a lot better at marketing bands than I was at playing in them, which is why it led to a much better transition. And truthfully, it's sort of a better suiting for my talents than me being on stage.
What a fascinating industry to be a part of. And what you do is important because otherwise people don't get seen. And so, Mark, you
That's right.
describe yourself as a revenue first marketer. What does that mean? How does that philosophy shape the way that you lead organizations today?
Yeah, so I work with a lot of, founder CEOs at companies that are fast growing, and many of them have been burnt in their life by the marketer that, will spend 3 months debating, is it this color blue or that color blue? And I'm actually a big proponent and very passionate about brand strategy and positioning and messaging. And some of those things do take some creative synthesis and some thought, but I am disciplined in knowing that the whole point of marketing and sales is to generate revenues. And so I always try to approach it through the lens of what is our most pressing issue for driving revenues. And if it's having a brand that's going to break through with that exact right color blue, we'll spend the time to invest in that. But I also am also a big believer in sort of an agile product development perspective and the idea of a minimum viable product. And instead of, going all the way to 100% of exactly what something could be, oftentimes getting to that 80% of what it needs to be is where you stop and then make sure that it's really generating the revenues that it should be generating. So we could polish up the copy on an email for days and days and days, but we're better suited to get that email being out sent to people and then seeing what the response rate is and seeing how much revenue it generates
Yeah.
before we spend too much time on that creative synthesis.
At modern revenue strategies, you often function as a fractional CMO. First of all, what is a fractional CMO? And what are the leadership challenges and advantages of stepping into a company part time and still having to drive long term results?
Yeah. So, for companies that are fast growing or even just sort of aspire to grow, when they're at this, sort of 500,000 to a million range, they really can't afford the marketing expertise or sales expertise, even that they need in order to get to the next layer. And historically, the way that they've tackled that is, one of a few ways. They either bring in someone who's expensive, but that person at A, it's very expensive. Oftentimes they want equity. And so then that dilutes the founder's position. And they tend to have big personalities in marketing and sales. And so that can make a big impact on your culture. And that
Yeah.
may not necessarily be what you're looking for. And so rather than that very risky investment with someone big, they can use an outsourced or fractional leader like myself that can come in and not demand equity, be a lot less expensive because you don't really need me for 40 hours a week, and then build the systems that can actually get the business up and going. And unfortunately, the third option that people oftentimes choose is to, sort of hire a more junior person that doesn't have the expertise. And that person can never really break through because they're just missing the expertise and experience that they need in order to know the strategy that needs to be done, in order to do the analysis of where to go. And so by being an outsource, I can essentially function at the same price point as a full-time junior person, but deliver that same expertise and strategic approach that a very expensive person might.
Yeah, you work closely with SaaS and tech companies. So, what patterns do you see and how these companies struggle to align sales and marketing? And how can a leader fix that?
Yeah. So it's funny. Patterns and recognition is a big part of what we do. And in fact, we're big believers that the path to success is you need a map, which really, is sort of these patterns. And we've studied hundreds of companies and benchmarked dozens of different metrics and KPIs and see patterns within different industries and even sub niches. And then with that map, you also need a compass that helps you adapt so that you can set your priorities, build the right engines for where you are in your growth, build that alignment and collaboration with teams as the teams, grow over time and track the right KPIs. And then you also need a guide, someone that can help you see the strategy, someone that can help you build the systems, and then also bring that creative synthesis piece. So within that, sort of pattern recognition, there's a couple things that we see. Companies go through the same, sort of growing pains at the same stages, remarkably close to each other. And so there's a break point at about $1 million. There's another break point in the sort of $3 to $5 million. There's another break point in the sort of $10 to $15 million, another at about 25. And the same things need to be accomplished for companies to advance. And very oftentimes companies will sort of grow quickly and then kind of move along sideways. And it's because they didn't accomplish one of these key objectives that they needed to break through to that next stage of growth. And so that's one of the things that we help them do, is just identify those patterns and recognize where they are. And then the other pattern that we see a lot is that as a company is growing quickly, the CEO is, they worked in an industry for a while and they had an idea for a better mousetrap. So they went and founded a company to build that mousetrap. And they know what's right about it because they just built it. And they know what's wrong about the competition because they used to work there. They've got enough of a Rolodex that they get some clients. And so they start growing, but then they sort of stall out. And the first thing that they do often is they say, well, I'll just hire a salesperson and he'll be exactly like me. And so then we'll double our revenues. But it's missing all of the process that salesperson needs to be successful. And so that's usually one of the first big patterns that we see, is that many CEOs have tried that and failed. But the second thing that we see happen is, well, that didn't work. I'll go to an ad agency. So they go to an agency and they spend some money, but they wind up saying the wrong things or to the wrong people or both. Because again, it's missing the strategic approach that they need in order for that to be successful. And so that's when they really start thinking about, well, how do I build these processes so that my sales team could be successful? And how do I build the strategy on what I need to be saying and who I need to be saying it to, and how and where to say it in order to be successful? And that's the type of the work that we
Yeah, and one of your pillars is connecting strategy to execution. So let's say you've helped a company figure that out. We've dropped the ball. There's a disconnect between strategy and execution. What's the actual action that you help them take? What are some of the things that you do to get them to be successful in their space, in their industry?
Yeah. So often companies are hoping that there's an easy solution. And that's very often, that's sort of like a tactical execution of someone has said, hey, if you just bought ads on Google, you'd
Right.
have a ton of business. And they're like, great, let's go buy some ads on Google. Well, what do you say and who do you target? What offer do you make? How do you price it? Those are all the strategic questions that if they haven't answered and they don't really understand, no amount of good execution is going to deliver the revenue that they're after. And so there's an old phrase. Abraham Lincoln said that if he had an hour to spend chopping down a tree, he'd spend 50 minutes sharpening the axe. And I'm not a big golfer, but I do love the analogy of just a little bit of difference in how the club hits the ball makes a big difference in where it lands down on the fairway. And that's the way that we think about strategy, is spending the time to sharpen the axe, spending the time to make sure that we're connecting with the ball straight and solid, means that you can spend a lot less money on execution and get a lot more results. But too often companies are like, I just want the simple solution. Let me just buy this thing, this silver bullet, this guru who's promised me
Right.
that they're going to deliver, super success from this one trick that they don't want you to know. But it really comes from taking the time to do that strategic work, but then quickly connecting that to that execution that does deliver the revenue, so that we're not spending months and months debating this color blue or that color blue. We're just taking the time to think, is blue right or is red right?
Mark, you've worked with dozens of leadership teams. What makes a great marketing leader stand out in the C-suite? And how can emerging leaders develop the skills that it takes to be successful?
That's such a great question, though. And the what I have seen is that when marketing is done right, it's such a strategic position within the leadership team because it's the voice of the customer, and so it can help the CEO understand what should we be building, from whether it's a product or a service set or whatever it might be. What does the customer care about, and what will they care about in 5 years, so that
Yeah.
we can be moving that direction. Marketing is also the sort of point of intelligence around what are competitors doing, because no one tracks competitors as closely as marketing does. And so that nexus of what the customer cares about and what the competitors are doing really guides the strategy for what the business should be doing in order to build a moat and build a wall in order to, remain differentiated. And so that is the role that makes a really strong, marketing leader. But too oftentimes marketers don't do that. They don't take that strategic approach. They
Right.
say, we're going to run some campaigns. We're going to try to, bring in new customers, or we're going to test and learn and just try a bunch of stuff out and see what works, which there's a place for that. And you certainly want to use data driven, strategies and tactics as you do test and learn. But the real important role is that understanding of the marketplace and then communicating that so that the leadership team can then build the processes that allow them to dominate their category and to really rule that niche rather than just, participating in the category and, trying to pick up some of the scrap. And that's the thing that is really required for a marketing leader to excel, is to do that synthesis of what's happening and then to convey it in a compelling way so that you're actually advocating for a course and providing a point of view that the CEO and the rest of the leadership team can respond to.
Yeah, I'd love to talk a little bit more about data-driven decision making. How should leaders balance intuition with analytics? Because obviously analytics are important, but then there's gut. There's gut intuition. This is the way that I feel. How does that have a place, especially in a fast-moving tech space or spaces where data can be just really overwhelming?
So yeah, there's an old phrase in analytics that all models are wrong, some models are helpful. And in psychology, there's a phrase that the map is not the territory. A map is an oversimplification of the real world. And so the real key, and this is what's challenging to know, is where is it helpful versus where is it just busy work? And that's one of the key things to do. And oftentimes I see decision makers and leaders at companies make that choice based on what's the cost of getting it wrong and what's the opportunity for getting it right. And if the cost of getting it wrong is catastrophic, or if the opportunity for getting it right is transformational, then that means you should probably spend more time on that decision, especially if it's irreversible. But if it's reversible, if the cost and opportunity aren't that great, go with your intuition, go with your gut. But if the cost of getting it wrong can be really bad, or the cost of getting, or the opportunity for getting it right is really good, and you can't reverse that decision, that's when you need to really layer in not only data, but then analytical models to make sense of that data so that you can make the best possible decision in that instance.
Mark, you speak about building repeatable and scalable systems. How can leaders create marketing operations that don't just work once, but they can use it to grow their business?
There's a great company called Winning by Design, and they have a methodology called revenue architecture, which I'm certified in. And they sort of say revenue for a company comes from impact. Your customers are willing to give you money when you make an impact on their business. And so revenue comes from impact, and recurring revenue comes from recurring impact. And so they've built a model that I adapted in my book and talk about a lot, called the bow tie funnel. So the traditional sort of sales funnel starts at the first sale. You got a funnel of people become aware, you build interest, desire, and action, you close a sale, and we're done. But they have turned that on its side, recognizing that the retention revenue typically surpasses acquisition revenue for most companies within 5 years.
Hmm.
And then expansion revenue typically surpasses acquisition revenue from companies within about 7 years. And so rather than just focusing on that first sale, instead, you should build the whole business focusing on that recurring impact. How are you constantly making improvements in your customer's business that they're willing to constantly be paying you additional revenue? Now, this is obvious in the B2B SaaS space because software as a service, sort of by definition is subscription. But we're even seeing that in the professional services and lots of other spaces that you really think of as like a one-time standalone thing. You buy this product and then you're done, or you buy this service and then you're done. Many of those companies are finding ways to build underpinning software or sort of SaaS type solutions that makes the product work better. It makes the consulting or advisory services more impactful in the organization that then creates an opportunity for ongoing and recurring revenue and by making recurring impact within the organization. And not only does that smooth out cash flow and create a lot more scalability and really that exponential growth curve that everyone's chasing, but it also gives you the ability to deepen your relationship with your customer and add more value to them. And as business owners, that's what we should always be aspiring to do, is to add value to our customers. And so by creating an opportunity to add more value over time, you also create the opportunity to capture more revenue.
Yeah, Mark, you've built a really strong personal brand while also leading client strategies behind the scenes. So, how important is personal branding for today's leaders?
First off, thank you for that. That's a nice compliment. I aspire to do that. And I do think it's important because the marketplace is just so crowded. And especially in in the marketing space, and I talked about this before, there's so many sort of people who are out there slinging a magic bullet, or if you just do this one thing, all your troubles will be over. And that's just fundamentally not true. And likewise, there are people that are so obsessed with sort of tactical executions that they don't take the time to do the strategy. And then that can sort of lead their clients or their companies astray too. And so I sort of strive to put forward a specific point of view, which is that strategy is more important than tactics, and that process is more important than, sort of chasing growth hacks. And that's my belief. And so I think it's important for leaders to have a point of view and then to share it and to not be bashful about defending it and advocating it for it in the marketplace, because that actually makes everything better. Like, it doesn't hurt me for there to be fewer marketers out there that are snake oil salesmen. It helps me. And so if I
Right.
can upskill an up and coming marketer by guiding them with, ways to think about solving these problems. It's not looking for growth hacks. It's not looking for magic bullets. It's taking the strategic approach. If I can impact them and then they grow on to, adopt some of my approaches, that's better for the industry, which is ultimately better for me. Then I don't have to defend against the next prospect that I meet that assumes that I'm a snake oil salesman that doesn't know what I'm talking about, because they've met so many marketers that are.
Mark, what advice would you give to a first time founder or solopreneur trying to scale their go to market approach without a big marketing team?
So it's a challenge. And, there's a common belief, and I think that it is true, that sales and marketing is one of the last things that the founder should totally give up, but also one of the first places that they should get some outside expertise. And so there's a balance there. And I oftentimes tell the story of, a, a few months back, I decided I was going to repaint the downstairs bathroom. So I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and then I went out and bought a bunch of expensive equipment. And then I spent all weekend doing it. And then I had to hire a professional to come fix it for me. And so I could have had all the time that I spent trying to learn, and all the money that I spent on equipment, and all the time that I spent frustrating myself trying to do it right. Could have had all that back, because I wound up paying the professional anyway. And so that's one of the pieces of advice that I give to founders is get some professional help, but also don't totally abdicate your responsibility. And I've been through a number of startups myself, not all of which wound up working out. And one of the reasons was that I kind of abdicated my ownership of the financials to another member of the team that, sort of proclaimed to be a little more experienced in that area. And I was like, great, you handle it. I don't need to know. I did need to know.
Uh,
And it ultimately was painful for me. And if I had, brought in a professional to advise me, and then I could have had enough of an eye on it that I could have kept it going in a direction, I'd be in a different place. But that's sort of my advice, is to get some outside expertise, and to the level that makes financial sense. You know what I mean? Again, if it's a big question with a big upside and it's irreversible, that's the time to invest in either, good decision making systems or good outside expertise, and then to sort of grow and iterate as they move forward.
Mark, here's an important question. Out of all the celebrities and important people that you've known over the years, what's an interaction within the marketing space that you remember and you just think, man, that's a story I'm never going to forget?
Gosh, that's a tough one. So I mean, I have to give a shout out to Sasha Strauss, one of my professors when I was getting my MBA. He leads Innovation Protocol, which is a branding strategy firm here in Los Angeles. And he's known for being a brilliant, brand strategist. And I had worked in sales for many years and in sort of product marketing and kind of execution and digital marketing, and always had this sort of mythos around brand strategists that, they're alchemists, like, they're creating gold from lead and had no idea how they did it. And he did such a great job in the course that I had with him, and I've been fortunate enough to engage with him, since school. He's built a process, and that process delivers magic. But when you break it down, and there's the phrase, significantly advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. In many ways, he's built a technology of a process of how you really understand the customer and the marketplace, and you really understand the competitive landscape, and you really understand the unique nuances of your company and your offering. And that's what delivers this magic of a really powerful brand strategy. And it really demystified, but also sort of gave me the confidence that, many things that seem like magic from the outside and an insurmountable task, if you build the process around it, you can actually create consistent magic. And that's something that I always think of him related to.
Yeah, very cool. Thanks for sharing that. Mark, before we go, where can my audience connect with you? How can they get your book? What do they do?
Yeah. So I'll give a free copy to anyone that's interested. The book is Are Your Leads Killing Your Business? And it's all about how, you shouldn't be chasing quantity. You should be chasing quality, and how to build the systems that will help you do that. And so the download is at modernrevenuestrategies.com/free download. Not only will they get the book, they'll also get all of the templates and calculators and Excel spreadsheets and all the things that they need to start to implement this for their business today.
Mark, it has been incredible to have you on the show. I know for a lot of my listeners out there, like myself, that run small businesses, marketing can be a huge headache. And I'm glad that people like you are here to lead and work with integrity and help people from small businesses all the way up to the multi-billion-dollar companies. So for my audience, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast episode, and sign up for our free newsletter. Comes every month. We give you the good stuff. Until next time, Mark, thanks so much for coming on. Hope to have you on again, sir.
Thank you, Mo. I really enjoyed it.
All right.